Hey guys, it's Ganimed with Cure Audio, and as you probably know, Vaultage 4 has recently released. And after listening to that mix over and over, I made something very much inspired by it. With this video, of course, I'm not claiming to know how Space Laces does it. This is just the way that I found to kind of emulate that sound, so I hope you can get something useful out of it. Okay, so let's start with the drums. The drums are nothing special outside of two elements. So for the kick, I'm using a kick of mine as a basis. And the element that I am adding to it is thump with these samples, as well as rumble, which is pretty unusual. This is something you'd hear more in a techno track, but I thought it fit, and that's kind of what I heard in the backdrop of some Space Laces tracks. For the clap, I have a transient layered on top, but it's got a mid-heavy layer as well that's got reverb on it. And then a crunch layer made up of noise and a duplicate of the clap that's heavily distorted. Altogether, that's what the drums sound like. The cymbals are nothing special, they just hit with the kick and clap, so there's no offbeat. Now let's get to the bass, and here's how it sounds on its own. Now the patch itself is pretty simple. The tonality is being carried by the sub and the saw wave. So that's where the main tonality comes from. But I'm also using this square wave only for the highs. As you can see, I have a high pass. And I have a Geiger noise layer as well. The count is at 41% and the stereo is at max. It's also going through this filter, so it doesn't sound as harsh. And for the processing, I am using this hyperdimension. I'm using two types of distortion, so the linear fold and the rectify. The linear fold is not doing that much, but the rectify definitely is. I'm using digital gated for some room, and it's being automated by the envelope one just so we don't get a tail. And then some stacks of multi-band compression as well as EQs to take out the mids and highs. Same thing with the last EQ here, taming the mids. This hard clip right here is not doing anything. I just put it here in case there are some peaks. And finally, I have this LFO that's modulating both the volume and the high pass on the square wave. So when it comes to the post-processing, the first thing is this EQ. I'm boosting this harmonic right here and taking out almost completely both the low mids and mids. And I am then using this EQ, this high shelf, as kind of a low pass. So I'm taking out and adding highs as needed. I'm then using distortion with decapitator and this EQ that's kind of repeating the same process. So it's adding the harmonic again, and it's also taking out the low mids and boosting some mids and highs. And then this reverb only on the mids. Now Wave Shaper is set at 50% on the mix, and it's adding both crunch on the high end and harmonics on the low end. Now this patch right here is kind of complex, so I won't be able to go as in-depth as I'd like to, but it is free to download. I released this a couple days ago, so you can go grab it for free. But what I'm mainly doing with it is modulating the mix, so it's not active all the time, and I am modulating both the peak and the low pass knob, as you can see. So what's happening here is stacks of distortion and tone shaping with the EQ. So as you can see, I have multiple instances of decapitator for the distortion. And I have this peak knob that's automating the peak in this EQ right here. Now, there is some tone shaping going on in the EQs, but it's unfortunately not tied to the serum patch that I made. This is just a patcher preset that I made, and it just happened to sound good, but the thought process behind all those curves and peaks is not tied to that. So there's not really a logic behind it, it just sounded good as is. But the main goal was just to have that peak moving and getting distorted, as well as having that low pass. And then after that, Camel Crusher for, again, distortion and compression, and then a reverb for throws. And then one final EQ to take down the low mids just a notch. Now, as you can hear, the bass doesn't exactly sound like it did when I played the full drop. And that is because it's missing both a rhythmic element and a vowel element. Now, the rhythmic element is being added by this Reese. I am just using the attack of it. I don't have the patch, unfortunately. I made this Reese a long time ago, but it is just two detuned saws that are being distorted together. And I'm using just the attack that's being created by the pitch going up and down really quickly. So I'm just using that attack. Now that already sounds way better, but what's adding a lot to it is the second element, which is the vowel element. And that is being added by heavily distorted vocals. Now, these vocals don't need to be anything in particular, so they can just be shouts. They don't even need to be intelligible. I pitch shifted and forma shifted them down a lot, but this is what they sounded like initially. And the processing is mainly distortion and a lot of muffling through EQ. So I am using this pitch shifter to pitch it down even more, and Trash 2 for the distortion on the Broken Amp Jam preset. At this point it sounds incredibly piercing, but I'm gonna add a D-doubler for the stereo effect, and I'm using this EQ to muffle the sound a lot. Now it's almost there, but it's still missing something, so I'm using Corrosion to add some noise, and Soothe to take out those peaks again. I'm not sure how big of a change this makes, but I added even more distortion and some reverb. So I'm mostly using these vocals to add back the vowel that I took away with the EQ on the bass. So it's just to add that back, and it's also because it sounds interesting. Now, what I think is also interesting about the vocals, and you can hear this in tracks like This Way, is that they're mostly unintelligible. They don't sound like they're saying anything, and they're just adding the vowel where the bass is kind of missing in that regard. And that's what I did, because I cut out a lot of the vowel and the mids off of the bass to leave space for the vocals. And these are adding vowel, they're adding crunch, they're adding room, so they're kind of filling whatever space we carved out from the bass. And so for me, the main takeaway is that you don't need to go over the top when it comes to the vowel presence and the noise. These two elements need to play off of each other and sound kind of inconsistent in a way. And you can hear that in tracks like Sandworm as well, for example. Even though that track doesn't use vocals, you can hear the vowel being inconsistent and kind of dancing around the noise. It's creating a rhythm of its own. Okay, I'll stop yapping now. Let's get to the accents. I'm using variations of the same noise and some whooshes and lasers. And the noise is the same Geiger noise that's in Serum. I'm just using ring mod and an EQ to boost the low end a lot and make it sound boomy. And then I'm using another type of noise. These are very low pitch saws, so you can hear the individual cycles looping very slowly, and they're panned left and right. And I'm using the Geiger noise again at a low count so you can hear the individual clicks. So yeah, I hope you got something useful out of this video, and if you want a specific topic to be covered, leave a comment down below or join the Discord, because we're often discussing music production, so there's always something to be learned. So yeah, see you in the next one.